It's really a pleasure to be with you, to share with you some of the things that we're seeing in the market. And I hope to share with you some ideas that make you think, maybe I would continue this conversation with my colleagues, or maybe come talk to us afterwards. My commitment to you is I'll share with you 2 or 3 ideas that are based on my experience as a project manager years and years ago, program manager, working with a lot of regional and global companies in their talent management initiative, in their development initiatives around the world. And also it's based on our company's experience. It's based on a lot of work that we do with a lot of clients, that we solicited some of their feedback and their challenges. It's based on our global perspective. And last but not least, it's also based on a partner of ours, Duke Corporate Education, where they focus, they're actually #1 in the world in customized executive development. So basically they deal with the top 100 people in most companies, and they customize an executive development program versus a standard or off the shelf and you fine tune it. It's from scratch, and it's very targeted to whatever the technology or the sector or what have you. So they've had some amazing experience, especially in the past 3 or 4 years, around the challenges in this VUCA world. So that point of view kind of converges to what I'll share with you today. So far, so good? Yeah. All right. So what I'll go through today is a quick, what I would call current realities, what we're seeing in the market. Project-based work, which is very familiar to most of you, and what I would call the relational gap that we see and hear with a lot of clients. Talk a bit about this adaptive strategic execution. Some people refer to it as relational skills, adaptive skills, all those what are those? Why do we need them? What are the focus areas under those skills? What do we mean when we say we want people to be more adaptive? What do we mean when we say we want them to be, to have a better mindset or a different mindset and so forth? And then I'll share some final thoughts with you. Sounds good? One of the things I'll mention is you'll get a copy of these slides. So you're more than welcome to take pictures, but you'll get a copy of these slides. And also some of the slides are there for reference. So I'll focus you on specific areas of the slide, but they're there for you to kind of get a bit more context. So with that, let's start with this term VUCA. How many here have used that term in your day-to-day work? Just raise your hand. Not many. How many are familiar with it? More. Whether you're familiar with this specific term or not, it's really a term that it came from technology and different background to it. But the point is, it stands for this volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity that a lot of organizations are dealing with. Some sectors much more than others, but it's an eventuality. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when this world, this disruptive world that's all around us is impacting us on our personal lives and definitely on the companies. Would you agree that your business is becoming more complex? Just quickly, show of hands. We're going to do a quick lightning round. Oh, only 50%. I'm curious, somebody that said, no, my business is not getting more complex. Why would you say that? I would love to have a kind of a sidebar discussion, because if there's one consistent theme from every client I'm in front of, it is they're telling us that their business is just becoming more complex. This complexity is negatively impacting their ability to execute their strategy because it's just too complex. And it's causing some not so good outcomes. So if you look at your more strategic initiatives in your organizations, many would say, if not all, that there is room for improvement in how we implement those strategic initiatives. And especially in this volatile, ambiguous, unclear scope that is a bit at odds with the project management point of view. We as project managers, the first thing we want to do is what? Let's establish the requirements. What is it? What's the scope? That's the first thing. Make sure we can, kind of agree on what the outcome is. the work breakdown structure, the risk management, the scheduling, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't apply in today's world if you don't know what the scope is. Project-based work as well is increasing in complexity and cost. And the reason that we refer to our lens as a project-based work is because there is the official portfolio of most companies, right? The top 10, top 20, top 100, depending on the size of the company. But there's also the day-to-day work that happens throughout the organization that I argue that it is also project-based work, even if there is not a project manager officially assigned to it. Would you agree with that statement? So it's a lot of work in the organization that we're talking about it's also becoming complex. Changi Airport is opening a new terminal 2026, Terminal 5, right? You think it's just going to be another terminal? It's going to be a replica of Terminal 3 or 4? The guidance for that project is to maintain Changi's leadership position as an airport worldwide. So I can imagine they're reinventing how we going to engage with an airport. And knowing Singapore with all the great stuff they do, I can only imagine in 2026 how would that look like. So it's that kind of initiative cannot be boxed in a systematic PM point of view. I will build on that. Let me just expand just a bit more on what we call the project-based work matrix, a very simplistic look at any initiative in your organization, big, small, or large, big, small, or medium, sorry, that's what I meant to say. There's going to be some some planning and some execution, and you're going to need some technical skills and some relational skills. And what I mean by technical skills are not skills like technology skills. I'm talking about project management skills, business analysis skills, agile project management skills, those kind of skills. Make sense? And you also need some relational skills. Some description of the kind of the type of work in these areas. But I really wanted to focus on why do you think a project manager will be promoted from running maybe a project with 10 people and $10 million to maybe become a senior project manager or a program manager with much more scope and dollars and all that kind of stuff? What do you think is the reason behind that? In most organizations, why do you think people get promoted to that more senior position? Experience, okay. Talent. Success. All good answers. I submit that in my experience and my exposure, the number one reason is their technical capability. They're an amazing project manager. They're an amazing scientist. They're an amazing technologist. They're an amazing business analyst. That's why they get bigger projects and more exposure. Would you buy that? Okay. There are other reasons, of course, but I'm talking in general here. And what we want as you get bigger exposure, and especially in this VUCA world, we want them to focus on the relational side. We want them to get away from the detail. We want them to be more strategic. We want them to be big picture. We want them to lead, right? All those kind of things. And in our experience, what actually happens is their focus and energy is a bit more in the technical, or a lot more in the technical. Would you agree with that? And that it's human nature. I am more comfortable in guiding you. I'll pick on Steve back there. Steve and I were project managers together. Now I'm a program manager. He reports to me, and we're working on some schedule. And I say, Steve, let me show you how I make Microsoft project hum. Let me show you how I can use Primavera and show the beautiful charts and build the S-curves and the WBS cross-reference with the cost loading. That's not what we want them to do. But that's because I'm more comfortable with that, and it's easier for me to focus on that. Would you agree? Think about your own experience. It's just a natural, and often it's like, I can do it better than you, Steve. Let me show you, because I used to do it in the past, right? So this creates what we call this relational gap especially in this VUCA world, which has exposed it exponentially, that you need some specific skills and development. Because let's face it, maybe 10%, 15%, 20%, whatever percentage in your organization, the people are born with the right DNA. They figured it out. They know how to transition away. But do you have a development program for those either senior project managers, program managers, and often it goes across to like that functional manager bit, you know, into the product managers, into the middle management piece. Often they're left on their own. There's no development or guidance in having them focus on the relational skills. And we see that as a gap in a lot of clients that we deal with. Their, you know, the complexity all around us, the VUCA world, compounded by the inability of a lot of folks to deal with these relational skills. Make sense? Okay. So I encourage you to think about in your own organization, maybe as you reflect on this, how true is this? What are some of your challenges and what are some of your strengths within your own organization as maybe one idea to follow up? Just very quickly, again, the technical skills that we're talking about, 2 examples of those. This is an agile program for somebody. I know it's a busy slide, don't have to worry about it. But there are different development paths for an agile project manager to become better. There is a project management solution that this is how we develop the project manager. Just an example. What I'm talking about is these kind of challenges that our clients ask us. How do I make my people more collaborative? How do I instill a sense of creativity and innovation? How do I change a mindset? And one of my favorite one is actually I added this last night because I heard it from a client. I want my program and project managers to partner, not deliver, whomever they're dealing with, the client and the team. It's not about delivery or only about delivery. So these are the kind of things that we're talking about. So let's go to the third area and talk about the why, if you will. And what I wanted to share with you is our perspective on the reality that drives the why. So at the 1 o'clock direction, I think with all our work with global, regional, large, and even medium-sized companies, they would say that their strategy is moving from the middle towards the outside of that circle. It's moving away from being static strategy, over 5 years, 10-year strategy, to a much more dynamic and often unpredictable strategy. It's not a straight line anymore. So that from a strategy point of view, the environment is completely different. From the 11 o'clock direction, the work is moving away from being defined. We've done it before. We're fine-tuning it. We know what the scope is, to exponentially becoming emergent, interdependent. You know, some folks are working a project on technology that hasn't been invented yet, you know. And then in the 6 o'clock direction, from a people point of view, we see that everywhere around the world, it's moving away from the command control structure of being directed to a much more collaborative and interconnected workspace. This is where companies want to leverage this interconnectivity and collaboration to accomplish what? What do you think they want to accomplish with that? Thoughts? To accomplish this strategy. To lead those strategic initiatives that are critical to the success of the company, that are no longer supported by this direct command and control center, if you will. And we believe that the leaders, and whether you like it or not, if you're a project manager, program manager, junior project manager, senior project manager, PMO director, you are a leader. And we think that leveraging the leader level is an important part of implementing your strategy. As a company, you have to come up with your own strategy. We cannot help you with that. We can help you on the talent management on how to get those leaders focused on the right thing. Let me ask a question. How many of you will say that you are clear about your own company or business unit even strategy? That you understand and know and clear about the direction of your company. It doesn't have to be a 10-year strategy. It could be the next 18 months or 2-year strategy. Can I see a show of hands of how many are clear about it? Look around the room, please. This is a major disconnect in most organizations where the executives have something I call the curse of knowledge. They've been talking about all kinds of ideas. They're bringing consultants. People are parachuting in, retreats, all kinds of initiatives. And they've been talking about it for 6 months. And then what do they do? Let me tell everybody what the new strategy is. And it's often how many pages? In your own company, when somebody communicated strategy, is it a 1-pager or is it a 55-page power deck? It's usually the latter. It's usually a 55-page PowerPoint presentation that most of the organization is like tuned out after slide 5 because we have not involved the organization in that strategy. And this is what we focus on in this point of view on adaptive leadership. One of the key points is alignment. It's alignment around the center leaders, which are all of you in organizations, and the strategy. Because how can I direct? How can I motivate? How can I inspire? The presentation right before we took the break, remember at the end he was talking about the 4 things he wants to give to his team, right? If he does not understand DBS strategy, do you think he'll be able to do that? It's very hard. If you don't internalize it, discuss it, see why, if we don't believe it, you're not going to be able to lead the doers to make sure that they're aligned with what we're trying to do. Does that make sense? Okay. So the point of view is there are essential skills that we're calling technical, that are absolutely important to get us better in productivity and efficiency and project management and program management and business analysis and agile PM and all that kind of stuff. Absolutely critical. But what we see is a much more adaptive focus of these next practices that are much more around collaboration and mindset. How can you convince an individual who has been very successful in your organization for, let's say, 15 years? He or she has gotten awards, been on trips, the CEO congratulated him or her many times. He's often referred to as maybe the firefighter in your organization. He or she can be like parachuted into any problem project and can solve it. You know what I'm talking about, right? In your organization. How can you convince that person that all the work that they've done to be successful so far, they have to put aside? Because if they applied everything that they've done in the past to this VUCA world, do you think they will be successful? What do you think? In most of our interactions, most of our discussions, all the research says that's not the case. You need a different way of looking at things. You need to run to that snowball and make sure that you're trying to embrace that with an open mindset. And can you change people's mindset with an email, effective June 1st, from a CEO? You can send an email, effective June 1st, I want everybody to be 100% more innovative, and I want them to have a better mindset in this VUCA world. One alternative, but often that just doesn't work. You need to do the hard work on alignment, on the explanation of why, and then help people, help the 80%, if 20% get it, help the 80% develop that skill. One of the areas I'll talk about later on is called influencing, right? What's another word for influencing in your organization? Can you think of another word? Negotiation, that's a good one. Sorry? Motivation. How many think of it as politics within the organization? Maybe you're thinking about it, you don't want to say it. I would say my experience has been, it has a negative connotation. It's this politically connected people, somebody can know. It's politics. I don't deal with that in my... Well, politics often has a negative connotation, but you know what? We need to change the mindset. We need to change somebody's mindset to say, you know what, let me help you, the 80%. Let me show you some tools, some ways to influence other people. I'll give you 5 different ways to look at the individual or the situation. You can practice it in 1 or 2 ways, and I can get them from whatever level they are to a much more productive level in the influencing skills. Because if I ask you to think about the most productive, most maybe engaging, most the best boss you've ever had. Can you think of your best boss? Everybody think of your best boss, he or she, that it could be now, it could be in the previous time. 1 adjective to the best boss you've ever had. Please? Inspiring. Inspiring. Passion. Flexible. Motivator. Ruthlessness. Okay? No, actually, you call it like it is. There's a lot of respect for that, absolutely. You know, and that, I would even build that on influencing skills, because truthfulness is just as important about in influencing as other things. Yes, please, one last one. Good listener. Good listener. He or she has a couch in their office. Nobody said he or she does the best work breakdown structures. He or she has the PhD in astrophysics. Nobody said it's a technical area. It's always the things you just talked about. And that's what we're trying to focus on, is how to change that mindset. Because the way you change somebody's mindset is you have to put them in a situation where they're vulnerable, that they can have an aha moment. You can scream at somebody 10 times, but you cannot force them to change the mindset. You need to kind of lead them to the right mindset. And some folks, you cannot lead. What do you do with those folks? In your organization, the folks that are problematic, maybe below par performers, how do you handle those people in your organization? Fire them. That's an interesting idea, but do you think that actually happens? What typically happens? Change, outsource it, make it somebody else's problem. Absolutely, yeah. You know, that sounds good. Okay. Any other thought? What's the most typical one? PIP. PIP, you know, training, coaching, HR gets involved, blah, 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 blah. I would say the number one I have seen, the number one actual, not maybe effective, actual strategy is do nothing. Most organizations do not handle those situations. They might do some of the things we talked about, but in reality, and in this VUCA world, you have to give folks a chance, develop them, but there are some casualties that are going to happen. So we talked about kind of what we're seeing in the market. We talked about this leadership gap or relational skills gap, why strategic execution. Let me just spend a bit of time on the focus areas, or what are some of the things that are important to become an adaptive leader, that are important in this VUCA world. And I'm just going to give you a peek in how we went about doing it. I'm going to go through the slides quickly, but I'm hoping that I can just give you a peek into our thinking on how we did that. So we started with this point of view on the self model, as we call it. And before we got into each of the domains, strategy, work on people, we said, what is kind of the overarching context? And it was complexity. More and more organizations are telling us our business is extremely more complex, and will continue to do that. The innovation that's happening around us is even causing more complexity in technology, of course, artificial intelligence. I was with a large accounting firm in China that they have 90,000 they do auditing, okay? They think within 12 months, they will be down to 5,000. Because there's not going to be any need to flip through pages of auditing books. It's going to be replaced by some kind of technology. And the banking sector, many of you are here in the banking sector. I mean, that's going through a revolution probably in the next 12 months that is just insane in terms of how we interact with bank, what kind of products, what have you. So anyway, we looked at the complexity and we looked at what are the key issues facing companies and validated it with them through market research and client input. And then we said, okay, if we can overcome these issues and these challenges, then we're on to something. So in this one, they said, you know what? The top two areas is how do I manage stakeholder relationship when there's way too many of them? And the second one, how do I make sense of complexity? Complexity needs a whole different way of looking at the situation. You cannot apply the same way of thinking in a complex problem. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. But basically we said that and said, okay, let's identify these challenges. And then we went on and said, let's take the strategy domain, identify what are the challenges, and hopefully we can find the focus areas. Look at the work domain, identify the challenges and issues, and look at the focus areas, and same thing from the people domain. And basically we converged on 8 areas of focus. Let me talk a little bit about maybe number 4. This jumped at us in spades, as they say. Design thinking. How many are working or been exposed to design thinking in your organization? Okay. Actually, quite a bit. But if there's a mini revolution happening in our project management world, in PM 2.0, if you will, I would say design thinking is a key part of it. Historically, it's been in the product area, but there's a whole set of techniques and ways and approaches to help us open our minds to more collaboration. Let me highlight the making sense of complexity. If you look at a complex problem or a complex situation, we come at it from a point of view that you have to look at it differently. You have to think about it differently, and you have to choreograph it differently. If you apply the same way that you've done it before in the past, you will not be successful. You're not going to be able to get that collaboration or the aha moments or the breakthroughs if you don't do this approach. How many have been in a meeting and spent the meeting making the case why we should not do this project? Just raise your hand. In the past 5 years, have you ever been in a meeting that says the purpose of the meeting, can we make a case for not doing this project? Especially if it's a complex project. That rarely happens. Look at it, 3.9%. How many have been in a meeting where you've had yourself or somebody else ask why you were doing this project? Probably most of you, right? A lot of you. How many have asked why 5 times? If any of you had children, it's that kind of, if you've asked it 5 times, you're on the right track. My point is this, there's a whole different methodology and approach and thinking on how do we deal with this complex project that are undefined. They're ambiguous. They're uncertain. There's a lot of moving parts that you cannot control. And one analogy that I would share with you in this thinking is, as project managers, we're maestros. Is maestros an ungendered term? I think so. Anyway, What? Anyway, doesn't matter. We orchestrate the cross-functional work. Would you agree? That cannot work in a VUCA world. That cannot get you success today and the next 3 years in this crazy world we live in that is just going to be shocking in 5 years. I'm going to go on a tangent. How many read the 5 in 5 survey or report? Google number 5, IN5. It's an annual report that they predict 5 things in 5 years. And I think it's through the IBM Watson project. It's scary. It's absolutely scary. And we see this from a lot of our clients. They're looking at some competitors that if they get something right with this new technology, their whole current business model is gone. And I'm talking about some serious big companies in pharma and manufacturing and banking and all kinds of stuff like that. So my point here is we have to think about a jamming session. How many play a musical instrument? If you are, I congratulate you. I started learning the piano 3 years ago. I suck at it. I am horrible. But I think it's a way to engage and think differently. And the reason I did that, I don't want to mention the person's name, one CEO forced his executive team, this is a large global company, for each to learn a musical instrument as a way to kind of converge, build trust, new ways of thinking, all those kind of things. Some of you are smiling and you know what I'm talking about. So my point here in the complexity world, in the VUCA world, we got to think about when do we orchestrate and when do we jam. Where we jam, we build on each other's ideas and something beautiful happens. Not every time, probably 1 out of 15 times. But that's the breakthrough that you need, especially in a complex situation. One other thought. How many here have a direction in your organization about becoming an agile organization? Or heard your CEO, we want to become more agile, right? And typically how they approach it is where? They look at the supply chain or the life cycle and they try to do it faster. Does that make sense? So they try to do product development faster, they try to do research faster, they try to do launch faster. It's a horizontal way at it. We come at it from a point of view to say, vertical alignment between strategy, middle management, the doers. If you're aligned, that's just as powerful of being a agile business as the horizontal way. So some of the thinking that we have to infuse in people is this whole business agility from a vertical point of view. I'm trying to kind of give you a peek in some of the hopefully we've seen the eye-opening back and forth with our clients as part of this induction in all these focus areas. A couple of thoughts and one small example before I wrap up. A lot of our clients are looking at these relational skills or this adaptive execution, strategy execution program as a strategy to develop a foundation for culture and innovation. Because if I get everybody collaborating more, if I'm open about this, I'm clear about my strategy, that builds a foundation of the culture of collaboration and innovation. You know, Google did a project where they looked at all their teams. Would you agree Google is a very innovative company? Everybody agrees, right? They looked at all their teams and which teams had more products or services that they actually launched and made money on. Was it consistent across all their teams? And Google is probably one of the best examples of how they encourage collaboration, all kinds of initiatives to do that, and innovation and all that kind of stuff. But they found out that only 30% of their teams did 80% of the innovation. So they commit, this is public information, Google it, that's funny. Yeah, I'm in a different world. It's called Project Aristotle, where they actually did a consulting group came in and looked at all the teams to try to see what are the dependent variables can predict which teams were more successful or more innovative than others. And what do you think the results were? What would we think the words in that report? I thought it would be the smartest people, like, you know, he or she is, you know, like a PhD in some new programming language or something. That didn't even come up. It was alignment, trust, collaboration. It's all the things we're talking about, that those teams were more aligned and more trustful and more open and more collaborative with the right mindset compared to the rest of the teams. McKinsey Quarterly in September, just Google that, look at the report. It is basically a letter to the CEOs saying talent, especially what they call strategic implementation talent, which is all of us, is going to be in huge shortage worldwide. If you look at the next 10 years, 15 years, there is going to be a huge shortage of this talent. And you better come up with a talent management strategy to help you develop and attract the right talent as a key differentiator for the organizations. And so just a reference for you. And last but not least, a quotation that I saw, William Gibson, after he toured the Innovation Center in China, he said this: the future is already here. It's just not evenly distributed. The folks that can get it and try to capture more, they will be more successful. So last story, and I'll shut up. How many have been to Washington, D.C.? Do you remember a road called the George Washington Parkway? You probably don't. This is a picture of it, the George Washington Parkway. It's a beautiful road right on the Potomac. A lot of woods in the area. It's just a nice, beautiful drive. One of my colleagues years ago drove that road every day from his house to work, and he drove very early in the morning to beat the rush hour. One day, he didn't show up at work. His name was Carl. So we said, oh my goodness, is Carl okay? Anyway, by 10, 11 o'clock, we found out he was okay. But what happened is he hit a deer on the parkway, because it's a lot of wooded area. So deer is all over the place, especially early in the morning. If you've ever seen a car accident with a deer, it's a pretty major accident. I mean, the car is totaled. Thank God he was fine. Fast forward a week from that, and any time after that, Carl could be sitting, where's Simon? Simon's back there. I think it was the AV folks have been doing a great job here. But Simon is back there, and I could be having a short conversation with somebody, and the word George Washington Parkway comes up in a casual conversation. He will run as fast as he can, if he overheard it. He will run as fast as he can to join the conversation and say what? Please? Be careful in the George Washington Parkway. If you're driving in the George Washington Park, just be extra, extra careful. You know, the deer are all over the place, and you're going to hit a deer. Do not drive in the morning. The George Washington Parkway is a dangerous road. Try to go down through D.C. and avoid that road. One day I asked him, I said, Carl, you got to stop this. It could be in even a dinner setting. It was getting excessive. And I said, what do you think is the probability of hitting a deer on the parkway? What do you think he said? Low or high? No, in his mind, it was he said 30%, which, I mean, if you look at it, there's about 100,000 cars that go through the parkway every day. If you do the math, 30% times 100,000, there will be 30,000 carcasses of deer lined up on the parkway. The equipment to remove the deer will not be able to remove them fast enough, you know. My point with this is we all have our George Washington Parkway story. As we look at this VUCA world, and remember the intent we talked about earlier, this previous speaker talked about the intent, and we look at that intent, we have to disengage from our George Washington Parkway story because it is just not based in reality. In our mind it is, but we have to be very specific about disengaging that. So with that, I wanted to thank you and happy to continue this conversation after when we break outside or by the exhibit center. So back to you.
Thank you.